The Pike-Pawnee Village Site, or Hill Farm Site, designated 25WT1 by archaeologists, is a site near the village of Guide Rock in Webster County, in the south-central portion of the state of Nebraska, in the Great Plains region of the United States. It was the location of a village of the Kitkehahki band of the Pawnee people, in a region of the Republican River Valley that they occupied intermittently from the 1770s to the 1820s. In 1806, the village was visited by a Spanish expedition led by Lieutenant Facundo Melgares, and, soon after, by an American expedition led by Lieutenant Zebulon Pike. At the village, Pike persuaded the Pawnee leaders to haul down a Spanish flag that they had received from Melgares, and to raise the flag of the United States in its stead. The location of the village visited by Pike was not known for many years. In the early 20th century, two sites were proposed, this one in Nebraska and one in Republic County in northern Kansas. A dispute between the historical societies of the two states ensued, titled The War Between Nebraska and Kansas. The dispute was eventually resolved in favor of the Nebraska site. Investigations conducted at the site by William Duncan Strong, Waldo Weedle, and A.T. Hill were instrumental in the development of Great Plains archaeology, and of Pawnee archaeology in particular. The site is a National Historic Landmark, and is listed in the National Register of Historic Places. Description: the site lies on a terrace on the Republican River's south side, near the village of Guide Rock. At the terrace's north edge is a near vertical 25 to 30 foot bank. The floodplain of the river extends about 1/4 mile from the bank's base to the present channel. The remains of over 100 earth lodges lie on the terrace between the bank and hills to the south, which rise 125 feet above the site. On the hills are 5 cemeteries. The village complex also includes a council site and 2 open courts where a hoop game was played. The village extended for at least 1,200 feet from east to west. On its east and west sides were creeks, now dry, that ran northward into the Republican. At the time of the village's occupation, springs in the western creek flowed year-round. These would have provided a more convenient source of water than the river, since access to the latter was hampered by the steep bank. The springs ceased to flow at some time after the land came under cultivation in the 1870s. Not far downstream from the site is a hill known to the Pawnees as Paha, or hill that points the way. In the traditional Pawnee religion, this was one of 5 lodges of the Nahurus, spirit animals with supernatural healing powers. History 1770 to 1806. The southern Pawnees moved north. The ancestors of the modern Pawnee people were not a single unified tribe. At the middle of the 18th century, they consisted of 2 major groups. The Stead, or Wolf Pawnees, had migrated northward with the Arakaris, and had probably been in Nebraska since 1600 or earlier. By the beginning of the 18th century, they were established on the Loup River, which flows through central Nebraska into the Platte River from the north. The second major division of the ancestral Pawnees was the Southern, or Black Pawnees. The migration history is not well documented, but by 1750 they, with the related and allied Wichitas, had established what seemed to be a secure territory on the Arkansas River. The security of the southern bands depended on French trade in arms, and this was disrupted by the French and Indian War. In 1763, France surrendered the Louisiana Territory under the terms of the Treaty of Fontainebleau. Great Britain obtained the portion of the territory east of the Mississippi River. Spain received the territory west of the Mississippi, including New Orleans, although they did not make the claim to that city effective until Governor Alejandro O'Reilly suppressed the rebellion of 1768. Once in control of New Orleans, the Spanish imposed severe restrictions on trade up the Mississippi, cutting off the supply of arms to the southern Pawnees and Wichitas. The neighboring Osages were not so affected, as they had access to arms smuggled by French traders from British territory in present-day Illinois. With superior weaponry, they drove between the southern Pawnees and the Wichitas, pushing the latter group southward to the Red River. The Pawnees moved northward into Nebraska, possibly because of news that modern weapons were available from traders on the Platte. The dates of the moves are not known exactly. The Wichita move from the Arkansas to the Red occurred at some time between 1768 and 1772. The Osages occupied the former Pawnee-Wichita hunting grounds on the Arkansas in 1774, indicating that the Pawnees had left by then. In 1777, a Spanish report indicated that they were in Nebraska. The southern Pawnees were divided into three bands: the Chouish or Grand Pawnees, the Pittahoratas or Tapage Pawnees, and the Kitkehahki or Republican Pawnees. The Chouish were regarded as the nominal leaders, and in the traditional account they led the migration to Nebraska, followed by the Pittahoratas. However, the Kitkehahki declined to follow the Chouish chiefs to the new settlements on the Platte. Instead, they established themselves on the Republican River, near what is now the Nebraska-Kansas border. Occupation history. There is much debate among historians and archaeologists concerning the dates of occupation of the Webster County village. 4 Kitkehahki village sites on the Republican are known, 2 of them quite large. This one, and the Pawnee Indian village site near Republic, Kansas, 49 kilometers downstream. The band inhabited the Republican Valley intermittently from the 1770s to the 1820s. Unfortunately, there is little information on which villages were occupied at what times, although there is a strong consensus that this village is the one visited by Pike in 1806. The following account, therefore, can only describe what is known about Kitkehahki occupation and abandonment of the Republican Valley, and not the history of this particular village. The Pawnees did not live in the villages year-round. In the spring, they planted and hoed crops near the villages. In mid-June, they left on the summer buffalo hunt. In September, they returned to harvest the crops and to hold their harvest festival. They then cached a portion of the food in the villages and left on the winter buffalo hunt, from which they did not return until planting time in the spring. Thus the villages were deserted for at least 8 months of the year. The Kitkehahki also moved, both in small groups and en masse, between the Republican and the Platte. The Pittahoratas and the Chouish seem to have lived together amicably from the time of their arrival in Nebraska. However, the Kitkehahki were divided between those who wanted to live independently on the Republican, and those who wanted to live near the Chouish on the Platte. The three bands frequently moved together on the summer and winter buffalo hunts, so there was regular contact between them. It was common for people to move from one household to another, especially upon returning from a buffalo hunt. This would have facilitated moves from village to village. At times, the entire Kitkehahki band abandoned the Republican and moved to the Platte. Generally, this took place in times of war, when the bands sought protection in numbers. Movement between the Republican and the Platte probably occurred continually until about 1825. War with the Skidis. When the Southern Pawnees arrived in Nebraska, the Skidis were not pleased to see them on lands that they regarded as their own. Nevertheless, they were willing to accept them as neighbors, so long as they kept to the south side of the Platte. However, the Chouish leaders demanded that they be recognized as the heads of the entire Pawnee people above the Skiddy chiefs. They defied the Skidis by sending a large hunting party to Prairie Creek, on the north side of the Platte within sight of the Skiddy villages on the loop. The Skidis responded by attacking the Chowie hunters and driving them back across the Platte. The Chowish and Pitahouaras resolved on war and summoned the Kitkehahki fighters to join them against the Skidis. The Kitkehahkish, unwilling to leave the people unprotected against Skidi raids, left the Republican and moved to the Platte near the other bands. The conflict with the Skidis probably took place sometime between 1770 and 1775. It concluded with the defeat of the Skidis, who, although nominally conquered, remained on the loop and continued to hunt separately from the other three bands. By 1777, the Kitkehahkish had moved back to the Republican. At some time between 1777 and 1785, the Kitkehahkish again abandoned and then reoccupied the Republican Valley. A Spanish account of 1785 describes a village on the south side of the Platte in Butler County, not far from the modern town of Linwood, Nebraska. This village was occupied by the Kitkehahkish until about 1785, when they returned to the Republican. War with the Omahas. War came to the Kitkehahkish on the Republican in 1798. The Omahas, under the leadership of Chief Blackbird, had become perhaps the most powerful group in Nebraska. They were located at the junction of the French trade route up the Missouri River and an overland route across northern Iowa, whereby the Sac and Fox brought British arms and goods westward. This allowed them to levy tribute and exercise control over trade on the Missouri. During the height of the power in the late 1790s, bands of Omaha warriors frequently visited the Kitkehahkish to perform the Calumet ceremony. This traditional peacemaking ritual had degenerated into what the Omahas called smoking for horses. The Kitkehahkish were obliged to give feasts and presents of horses to their uninvited guests. In 1798, a group of Omahas under Little Grizzly Bear went for this purpose to the Republican. The Kitkehahkish, feeling imposed upon by the frequency of these visits, stripped and beat the Omahas and drove them out of the village. When Blackbird learned of this, he ordered an attack on the Kitkehahkish. The Omahas descended upon the band's village, burned and plundered many of the lodges, and killed about 100 Pawnees at the cost of about 15 of their own men. The remaining Kitkehahkish had withdrawn into 4 lodges, occupying a position too strong for the Omahas to reach them and massacre them without unacceptable losses. Whether the Republican Valley was abandoned after the Omaha attack is not recorded. The invading Omahas had camped on the Platte, undisturbed by the Chowish, on the way to the Kitkehahkish. This might indicate that the two Pawnee bands were on bad terms at the time. The power of the Omahas was broken soon thereafter. In about 1801, a smallpox epidemic spread from the Skidis to the Omahas, killing half of the tribe, Blackbird among them. When the Lewis and Clark expedition reached the Platte in 1804, they found the Kitkehahkish living there. They were told that the band had returned to the Republican about 10 years before, but had recently moved to the Platte under pressure from the Kansas. By 1806, however, the Kitkehahkish were at peace with the Kansas and were once again living on the Republican. 1806, Melgares and Pike. Under the 1800 Treaty of San Ildefonso, Spain returned the Louisiana Territory to France. In connection with this transfer, France agreed not to sell the territory to a third party. French Foreign Minister Talleyrand had indicated that a strong French Louisiana would halt the expansion of Britain and the United States in the New World. Napoleon quickly reneged on this agreement. In the 1803 Louisiana Purchase, France sold the territory to the United States. This led to conflict between the latter nation and Spain. The Spanish contended that the sale of Louisiana to the United States was invalid, and that the territory had reverted to them. Although they were unable to prevent American occupation of New Orleans, they sought to check American activity west of the Mississippi River. Spain and the United States both sought allies among the Native Americans of the disputed territory. In June 1806, Lieutenant Facundo Melgares and 600 men were dispatched from the Spanish provincial capital of Santa Fe down the Red River and then northward into present-day Nebraska. Although no Spanish records of the Melgares expedition are known to exist, it is believed that its purpose was to find and arrest the Lewis and Clark Party, and to establish alliances with the Native Americans of the region, including the Pawnees. About a month later, Lieutenant Zebulon Pike left St. Louis with an American party of 23 men, and orders to negotiate peace between the Kansas and Osages, to contact the Comanches of the High Plains, and to explore the headwaters of the Red and Arkansas rivers. For guides and interpreters to the Comanches, Pike turned to the Pawnees. His Osage and Pawnee guides led him northwest through present-day Kansas toward the Kitkehahki village on the Republican. Melgares was the first to arrive at the village. His journey north had not been easy. Mutiny had broken out and been suppressed among his New Mexican militia, and many of his horses had gone lame, or had been stolen by Pawnee raiders. He had left 240 of his men on the Arkansas in southern Kansas before turning northward with the other half of his force. In the Republican village, he met with Kitkehahki and Chowie leaders, to whom he presented gifts, including Spanish flags. The Pawnees agreed to expel Americans from the territory, but also opposed the Melgares expeditions continuing to the Missouri River. In the face of this opposition, and with no supply lines and a force too large to live off the country, Melgares returned to the Arkansas and thence to Santa Fe. Pike at the village. Pike's party reached the Kitkehahki village on September 25, 1806, shortly after Melgares' departure. Upon his arrival, he was greeted by the ranking chief, Sharitarish, who invited him to eat in his lodge and told him of Melgares' recent visit. The Pawnees presented 8 horses to the Osages accompanying Pike, and members of the two tribes smoked pipes together. Pike's party established a camp fortified with rifle pits on a hill on the north bank of the Republican opposite the village. On the following day, a delegation of 12 Kansas arrived at the village. On September 28, they held a council with the Osages. Pipes were smoked in token of peace between the tribes. On September 29, Pike held a Grand Council with the Pawnees. At this council, one of Melgares' Spanish flags was displayed at the chief's lodge. Pike urged the Pawnees to haul it down and replace it with that of the United States. When the Pawnee chiefs demurred, I again reiterated the demand for the flag, adding that it was impossible for the nation to have two fathers, that they must either be the children of the Spaniards, or acknowledge their American father. After a silence of some time, an old man rose, went to the door, took down the Spanish flag, brought it and laid it at my feet. He then received the American flag, and elevated it on the staff which had lately borne the standard of His Catholic Majesty. This was favorably received by the Osages and Kansas, but apparently caused distress to the Pawnees. Perceiving this, Pike returned the Spanish flag to them, asking only that they not fly it during his party's stay in the village. At this, there was a general shout of applause. Pike had planned for the Pawnees to guide him to the Comanches. However, upon his arrival at the village, he was informed that the two tribes were at war. When Pike expressed his intention of continuing inland toward the headwaters of the Arkansas, Sharitarish urged him to turn back. He had prevented the Spanish from going further into American territory, and would likewise resist an American movement towards Spanish land. Pike refused to be intimidated. He told the chief that the young warriors of his great American father were not women, to be turned back by words, that I should therefore proceed, and if he thought proper to stop me, he could attempt it, but that we were men, well armed, and would sell our lives at a dear rate to his nation, that we knew our great father would send his young warriors there to gather our bones, and revenge our deaths on his people. The Pawnees relented, though unwillingly and with much dissent. Pike obtained horses from them, and set out on October 7th. He ordered his party to stay in a compact body, with guns and bayonets and sabers at the ready. He estimated that it would have cost them at least 100 men to have exterminated us. With no guides to the Comanches, he was forced to abandon that part of the mission. Instead, he returned south into Kansas, where he attempted to follow Melgares' trail toward the Arkansas. 1806 to 1833. Tarish was a Chowie who, at some time before 1805, had been involved in a struggle over the leadership of that band. In the course of this struggle, he had brought his clan to the Kitkehahki village on the Republican, where he had deposed At, the hereditary chief of the Kitkehahki. Although the exact situation is not known, it is thought that Tarish was trying to bring the Kitkehahki back to the Platte, to support his faction in the Chowie village. After 1806, the Spanish continued their efforts to win the friendship of the Pawnees. Messages were dispatched to the Pawnee chiefs, urging them to come to Santa Fe, and most of these messages went to Tarish. The fact that he received them while Longhair, the Chowie head chief, was ignored, fed his self-importance. In 1809, in an ill-judged attempt to impress the Pawnees, he led the Kitkehahki to war with the Kansas. By 1811 he had been defeated, and the Kitkehahki had been forced to abandon the Republican and move to the Platte. There is no firm documentary evidence of occupation of the Webster County village after 1809. However, analysis of pottery and glass beads suggests that the site was reoccupied during the second decade of the 19th century, and 3 letters from 1823 and 1825 suggest that the Kitkehahki were living on the Republican. By 1833, however, the village had been abandoned and the band was living on the Loup River. In that year, the 4 Pawnee bands, treated as a single tribe by the U.S. government, signed a treaty in which they gave up the lands south of the Platte.